today. Eugene's impact cannot be understated, but in heaven is well known. There's many people in heaven because of the work that he does through leading back to Jerusalem, Brother Yun Heavenly Man's ministry. And I've been privileged and blessed to travel with Eugene into China and also Thailand and Vietnam. Just a few months ago, we were in Vietnam together. And Back to Jerusalem is amazing, world-changing, kingdom-shaking ministry that has impacted millions and millions and millions. I've met some of the friends of Eugene who are leaders in the underground church in China, and they're the most faith-filled, humble, joy-filled leaders that I have seen. And they do things in a whole different way than in the Western church. And Eugene is such a great communicator, anointed articulator of God's heart in breaking the mold, in breaking off the religious spirits and doing organic discipleship. So we're really looking forward to hearing more from Eugene. We're really blessed at CMM to have Eugene on our CMM College of Theology Advisory Board, and he's helping shape the future of Christian education here and in other areas that he works in with Back to Jerusalem. And he's got amazing courses, a prolific author, one of the best writers that I know of, so I can't say enough about his books. I think you've all heard of Eugene, so I won't go much more in depth in his bio, but be sure to follow, to pray for Back to Jerusalem, and sow into Back to Jerusalem as the Lord leads. So thank you so much, brother. It's great to see you again. I was going to be with him in Iraq in January, and the world started to shake then. And a few days before I was going to go, the embassy was bombed, and I didn't go. Some of them went. They're brave. But at the time, it didn't look like we'd even be able to fly into Iraq. So things change, and we're in a time of sudden change, and we have to be flexible and know that the Lord will open the doors when his time is right. So welcome, Eugene. Great to see you. And thank you, Mina, your wife, for giving you to us so often for your time. So we appreciate that.
And thank you so much, brother. Now I just need to tell everybody that any expectations you have of what I'm supposed to say tonight because of what George or Nancy have said, you can bring those down, those expectations way down. I really love being with you guys. I'm not going to share very long. I just want to, I do think that this is a really special time. Of course, you know, I was actually working in China and Wuhan right when the virus broke out. We began to share about it pretty early. I was amazed when we went back and started looking at our early January posts that we started sharing with people about the coronavirus. And everything that we said during that time, which we were uncertain of, we were just really praying that God would lead us to share with people around the world the most accurate information possible. Actually, the most accurate information that's impossible, that which does not rely on our intelligence or even our knowledge, but on supernatural revelation from God. And when we went back and we looked at the videos that we recorded and sent out in January, that information is still legitimate today. Everything that actually took place was what we were saying was going to take place. And now we're seeing actually the whole world impacted. Now, one of the things that I think it's been really important for us with Back to Jerusalem is to continue on with the mission that God has given us. We just put up an article a couple of days ago on backtojerusalem.com about how Christianity has actually spread the most during 5 of the largest plagues to ever hit the world. The very first one happening under the Roman Empire after the resurrection of Christ contributed to most of Europe becoming Christian because of that massive plague that hit before Constantine became the emperor of Rome. And I was reminded just a few weeks ago, actually, as I was writing my dissertation for CMM, I was reminded that just 15 years ago, let me just back up for a second. Not everybody here might know that I've actually been working and living in China for the last 20 years. And when I first came to China, I was working together with Brother Yun, known as the Heavenly Man. He's a very dear friend of mine. He came and visited me when I was living in California. My background is in the U.S. military. I was a Marine. And so I was in the Marine Corps at the time, based out of Camp Pendleton. When I met with Brother Yun for the very first time, that moment changed my life forever. And I remember hearing about the Back to Jerusalem vision in the very early days. So in the year 1999, my wife and myself, we came to Hong Kong and we began to serve around 99, 2000. My wife is actually the one who took the Heavenly Man book from a notebook and put it into writing so that it could be written by Paul Hadaway. And we were really moved by this Chinese vision of Back to Jerusalem, which was not it wasn't that much known then in the West, but it was very well known in China. Actually, the vision goes back to the early 1900s. And I wrote a dissertation about the Back to Jerusalem vision for CMM. And during that time that I was writing it, I realized that when the book came out, The Heavenly Man, 2003, and then another book that we came out with called Back to Jerusalem in 2005. Both of those books were heavily attacked. And, I was new to this. I wasn't, if I was going to be attacked as a U.S. Marine, you stand in front of me and shoot, and I get to shoot back. That's usually how the war works, right? But when I'm getting attacked by fellow believers, people that I actually respect, individuals that I honor, people that I consider to be heroes in the faith, were attacking us and saying that the Back to Jerusalem vision was a scam, that Brother Yun was a fraud, and everybody around him could not be trusted, including myself. And that hurt quite a bit. And, there was a lot of different emotions that I was dealing with at the time. Like, do I attack back? My background is I was a U.S. Marine scout sniper. And so I thought, I could actually just eliminate some of these people that are attacking us right now. I had a couple ideas of how we could deal with these guys. And I had the privilege of being surrounded by some very wise believers that told us, the people that were on the ground, they said, don't worry about the attacks. Let us absorb the attacks. We will go and fight for you. You don't answer one of these attacks. You just do what God has called you to do, which is go out and preach the gospel in the closed countries. That's what God has called you to do. Do it. What will end up happening if you don't do this is you will spend your life, your career, your ministry answering attacks. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. And so from that point on, we began to focus on just doing the Back to Jerusalem vision and working together with the Chinese. What was amazing is that during that time in 2005, when we were called frauds, we were told that there was no way that the Chinese were prepared, and they were not going to be able to do ministry in other countries. That was only 15 years ago. That might sound like a long time for some and short for others. That doesn't seem like that long ago for me. But as I was doing this dissertation, I looked back and realized that in 2005, we did not have one single Chinese missionary in a closed country between China and Jerusalem, which is our main focus area. We did not have one missionary that we could point to and say, look, there is someone tangible standing on the ground in a closed country, just as the Chinese have envisioned. At that time, it was only a vision. Now, for this year, for this dissertation, I started going through and calculating all of the numbers that I've gathered over the years, working together with the different networks inside of China. And what I found was that according to the world numbers, today, China has more missionaries in the area between China and Jerusalem, the most closed area in the world, the 1040 window. China has more missionaries in the 1040 window than all the other nations combined. To me, that was not, 15 years is not a long time to mobilize and implement and send out that many missionaries as the Chinese have done in the last 15 years. And I think one of the reasons why is because we did not focus on the changes, the challenges, the persecution. Remember, China is a communist country that persecutes believers. We could have spent the next 15 years just dealing with the domestic issues inside of China, fighting the government, doing protests, marching in the streets, of trying to get China to recognize believers. But that's not what God has called us to do. We believe that God called us to complete the Great Commission, taking the good news of Jesus Christ to the areas where it's never been heard before. And that was our focus. And we just kind of went doggedly after that idea and kind of bit into it and wouldn't let go. And at times it seemed like we were fighting uphill, going upstream. But now that I look back in the last 15 years, the fight has been worth it. Every single step, every yard had to be fought for. And during this time of the coronavirus, I just have a verse that has come to me. It's a pretty well-known verse in Proverbs. Many of you will know it already by heart. Some of you may not. Proverbs 12:24. It may not sound like it has anything to do with the coronavirus and missions and evangelism, but for me it does. And the things that I'm going to be sharing tonight, just really briefly, might actually make many of you disagree with everything else that I'm going to say, because you're not going to like this first part. But it says here, diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor or slavery. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. The reason I think that that scripture spoke to me during this time is that, first of all, during this time of the coronavirus, I think that there were a lot of Christians that have been surprised. They're usually the same Christians that are surprised whenever disaster hits. And when I talk about Christians, of course, I'm assuming I'm speaking mainly to Western Christians on here tonight. If you guys are from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, this may not speak to you directly. I don't know. But for those that are in the West, primarily where I'm at now in Western Europe, as well as my family, friends, and good colleagues in North America, I feel that when disaster hits, there are times where we in the Western Christian culture become extremely surprised and baffled. And there are three reasons why I believe that we are baffled. There are three myths that I think that we often teach in Western Christian theology. These are three myths that I grew up with. Or I mean, I didn't grow up as a Christian, but when I did become a Christian in the Western church, I feel like I was taught very strongly three things that make, I believe, me as a Western Christian a bit weaker and surprised and taken off guard when disaster strikes and I find myself in the middle of enemy territory. The first, I'm just going to start banging these out, and then you guys feel free to ask questions at the end of this. I don't know how many questions I'll be able to answer satisfactorily, but I hope that this will be at least enlightening or maybe angering for some. But the first myth I think that we're often taught in Western Christianity is that we as Christians are entitled. You know, we get this idea that, you know, we are kings and priests, we are children of the king, and this is all true. But we believe that victory is automatically ours. Victory belongs to Christ, no doubt about that. Victory belongs to God. There's no doubt about that. But I think sometimes we feel that victory automatically should come to us and that we should not really have to work for it. When we begin to have this entitlement mentality, we begin to form an idea in our mind that we are owed something, that this entitlement creates an attitude that we deserve something, that when we think that we're automatically due something, we can easily justify walking over other people to get what it is that we think that we deserve. And this is why I think sometimes in the Western church, we see people that have been hurt because they feel that they have been used or walked over by individuals who really don't care. Why? Because entitlement also leads us to an egocentric attitude where we believe we are the center of the world. I worked together a little bit with the Amish. I absolutely love working with the Amish. And I was asking one of my Amish brothers that I was working with, why do you guys always seem so happy? You don't have anything good. You guys don't have internet, you don't have Facebook, you don't have a laptop, you don't have all the things that I actually value in life. I enjoy the fact that I can fly from one country to another, stay in a comfortable hotel, travel in a comfortable taxi, travel in a comfortable airplane. You actually have quite few reasons to be as happy as you are. You don't deserve to be smiling as much as you do. Why is it you are so happy? And we had been recording together with the Amish and doing some meetings in their communities in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. And one of the brothers told me, because we live our life by a philosophy that we call joy. Joy is an acronym where we put Jesus first, then others, and ourselves or yourself last. And if we follow this formula of Jesus, others, yourself last, we find that is the place where we get the most joy. They don't have this idea of that they are entitled to something. And I believe that the Bible calls us to be righteous, that we are children of the King, and we are to be righteous, not entitled. And what separates righteousness from entitlement is gratitude. The most grateful people that I've ever met are those that believe that the world does not owe them one single thing. Everything that they get, they believe that it is a gift that they did not deserve and they did not earn. When I look throughout the entire New Testament, there is an ongoing theme over and over and over again. And that is Jesus had absolute contempt for those that felt entitled. And we also saw that Jesus also had compassion for those that felt unworthy of the gift he gave. Now, you might agree with that, you might not agree with that, but that is the continuing theme that I see over and over again. One of the things that I noticed among the Pharisees is that they felt entitled, and entitlement breeds legalism, and legalism breeds complainers. And whenever you look at people that feel entitled, they often spend more of their time complaining than being grateful. Why? Because they always feel that there's something that they're entitled to that they're not getting. I'm very thankful that because of the death of Christ on the cross, I'm not getting what I am entitled to. And because of the fact that his grace erases that which I'm entitled to, and I'm now receiving that which I'm not entitled to because of his sacrifice, I can find complete joy in everything around me. We see it on the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most powerful sermons that we have in the entire Bible. And it says from the very beginning, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. We get this idea over and over and over. Blessed are those that don't feel entitled, but instead approach everything and every gift that has been given to them by God with absolute and complete gratitude. I think that when troubles hit, it is very difficult for Christians that feel entitled, that have been taught to feel entitled, because when a disaster hits, they feel like, what's going on? I deserve victory now. I deserve comfort now. I deserve deliverance now. And when they don't get it, there's anger, there's hurt, there's pain. And it's so much better to when I'm working together with my friends inside of China that see everything with absolute gratitude and give thanks to God. Because oftentimes what happens when people are entitled is that they begin to think that the world revolves around them and that their prayers are entitlements that God owes them. And when their prayers are not answered, he does not deserve praise until their prayers are answered, because they are entitled to their prayers being answered. I truly feel that everything that God has done for me, if he does not do one more thing, he's already done so much. He owes me absolutely nothing. And I am so incredibly grateful at all times for all that he's given me. So I think that this is really important when looking at evangelism, because if you approach evangelism, I was in a meeting. I've shared about this before. I was in a meeting with some Iranian Christian brothers and sisters. I was asked to come and speak at a conference. And at this conference was another American speaker. And the American speaker got up and began to teach that those that walk in the will of God face no opposition. And I thought, wow, where does the Apostle Paul fit in your sermon? Where does the Apostle Peter, where does any of the disciples, all who died a premature death, except for John, who, got a one-way ticket for a free vacation on the Isle of Patmos, where do any of these disciples fit in your theology if you believe that a Christian who walks in the will of God does not face opposition because you deserve absolute victory everywhere you put your feet? The second myth that I believe often makes us a bit surprised and taken off guard whenever disaster hits is the idea that God's calling depends on your resources. There are so many individuals that I talk to on a regular basis that tell me, Eugene, I'm ready to get into ministry. Eugene, I'm ready to, go out and preach the gospel to whatever country that they feel called in. Eugene, I'm ready to be a pastor. I'm ready to be a missionary. I'm ready to be an evangelist. As soon as God provides the way, as soon as the resources are there, as soon as the funding is there, I can tell you that not one single project that we have ever done at Back to Jerusalem has ever had a determined budget. I'm not saying that this is for everybody. I'm not saying this is for every ministry, but for us, we've always let God lead by vision and depend on the resources as we go. If the resources aren't there, then we do what we can do. But we believe in a supernatural God that provides every single step of the way. Last October, we were on tour with Brother Yun, and Brother Yun was speaking. And while he was speaking, there was a pastor who was introducing him, and the pastor got up to raise money for their church prior to Brother Yun speaking. And the pastor started to ask for money in a way that we were actually very uncomfortable with. And he wasn't asking for Back to Jerusalem. He was asking for his own church. They wanted to build a new building. And so they were taking up an offering for their church first. And so the pastor said, more money equals more ministry. If we don't have the money, we can't do the ministry. And I was so brokenhearted that was his conclusion. After serving God, he came to the conclusion that more money equals more ministry. And I have to tell you that after 20 years of serving together with the Chinese, I've worked alongside some of the poorest farmers you'll ever meet in your entire life. One of my dearest friends is a guy by the name of Zhang Liang. I wrote a book about his life. 2 years I spent together with him, and I wrote his biography, and it was such a powerful, I'm not exaggerating when I say that when I put pen to paper every single time, I trembled with fear that I might somehow misrepresent the Holy Spirit and his work in this pastor's life. His name was Zhang Rongliang. He often, came into my hotel room where we would meet together with mud on his pants because he had come straight from the fields. He didn't have a penny to his name, and yet he is a pastor of 10 million people. If you look him up on the internet, Wikipedia will have him, Zhang Rongliang. You'll find that he's considered to be a pastor of his own denomination. His church is so big, it's considered one of the top 10 denominations in the world. His church alone. He's got more people in his church than the country that I'm currently in right now. And he did not need a Facebook strategy. He did not need a special website. He did not need to have a special rally in an auditorium. In fact, he did everything he could to keep from being advertised about the work that God was doing through him and that God had called him to do. What he taught me was that I don't need more money in order to do the task that God has called me to do. I just need to step out in faith, and he will provide the resources in whatever way that means. One of the things that I've been excited about, like I said, and when I first started off, is that in the last 15 years, we've seen more Chinese missionaries go to the field, and I've had the privilege of being together with them. Now, George has said that, I'm a leader of Back to Jerusalem. I consider myself a janitor of Back to Jerusalem. I lead nothing. The Chinese pastors tell me what they want, and I try my best to serve them in what they tell me that God is putting upon their heart. And so I am basically a glorified janitor in many ways, where I'm just happy to be able to keep the broom closet that these amazing men of God work in every single day. And to watch these farmers, these uneducated, one of the things that we were attacked in the earlier days was that these guys are not educated enough. These Chinese missionaries are not educated enough to become adequate cross-cultural missionaries in nations where educated, well-resourced Western missionaries are having a problem setting a foothold. Areas like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Somalia. These nations where I've worked together with the Chinese, it seemed absolutely impossible that I can go in with a farmer who's never been to secondary school, who cannot speak the language, who has so many things that would point to a reason why they are completely and absolutely inadequate. And yet, we step out in faith anyway, and God continues to provide. One of the things that I've been kind of dwelling on, I'm a historian, so I love history. I love everything that has to do with history. And my background in the military, I particularly love military history. And one of the things that I've read about in not too long ago, I read about the battle for New Orleans. Some of you might be familiar with this. This is during the Battle of 1812 for the United States. For those of you that are not American that might be listening to this teaching tonight, in 1812, not long after the independence of America, the British continued to attack the U.S. and in order to take over and gain a new foothold, it was absolutely imperative that they take the city of New Orleans because it was at the mouth of the Mississippi River where a lot of the transportation of goods from north to south was actually taking place. And the Brits, they had the British Armada, right? They had the world's most powerful navy. Nobody on the high seas could go toe-to-toe with the Brits. And the Brits brought in 60 of their most prestigious, large, massive ships into New Orleans. And they were carrying almost 15,000 soldiers and Marines. And their goal was to take New Orleans, and there should have been nothing to stop them. But the U.S. military, which was barely a military at all, this little ragtag group, all they had were these little bitty boats. Now, they called them gunboats, but they were basically canoes with soldiers and Marines. There were about 58 Marines that were on shore during that time. Now think about that. 58 Marines, 15,000 well-trained British soldiers, extremely disciplined, would just walked straight through the American forces, even of an equal size. But they had these little boats. They had 5. Now, the Brits had 60 massive ships, and the Americans had 5 little gunboats. But these little 5 gunboats were able to hold back these 60 ships for a considerable amount of time, until one famous soldier by the name of Stonewall Jackson was able to set up a perimeter on the beach. He got just enough time that was given to him by these 5 boats that went out to fight the British Navy. Now, I think sometimes in ministry, it's very easy for some of us to get focused on wanting to be a part of the big armada. We want to be in the big fancy ships. We want the flag. We want the recognition. We want these massive ships that cause people to shake and pray and yell, and that get the big parades. But sometimes God is calling us to work in these small little gunboats, and we feel somehow inferior when we're looking at these other ministries that are huge, well-funded, extremely famous, great speakers. We sometimes get intimidated in the calling that God has given to us, because we feel like we're in these small little ships, these small little boats. Why were those small little boats so effective? Because the waters around New Orleans was too shallow for the big boats to move into. God has called many of us that are here tonight to be in our small little boats, because he's called us into the shallow waters of the enemy's territory. When we go into areas like, North Korea, I can't go into North Korea in a big flagship with several thousand soldiers and all of the ticker tape and parades that go along with that. God has called me into the shallow waters where only a smaller boat will work. And I have to be grateful for the resources that God has given to me, and know that it is through the resources that he has given that is exactly perfect for the calling that I have. I've learned from the Chinese that we have to look at our resources and appreciate them, and know that regardless of what God has called us to do, we are not restricted by our resources, but the things that God puts into our hands can propel us into amazing victories. But we cannot put our hope, our faith in the things that we can see. More money does not equal more ministry. Myth number 3, this is the third one. Sorry, I've gone a little bit longer than I want to, but myth number 3 that I think this is very, very important for this time during this coronavirus is this idea. And I'm not saying that this is for everybody. Not everybody has been taught these things. Many of you might come from great fellowships. I came from fellowships where this was a very strong part of our theology. And one of those myths that I got in that theology was that you don't have to work for victory. Victory will merely come to you because you deserve it. You inherit it. God, as a child of the King, victory will just come to you. And one of the reasons why I think that big disasters, catastrophes, attacks of the enemy can take so many Western Christians off guard is because they're surprised when they have to work to fight the enemy. One of the things that I've learned on the mission field inside of China, working in North Korea, working in Iran, is that you are called to be a fighter. You're going to have to fight every single day. You're going to have to fight for every single yard. The victory has been promised, but if God wanted to just give us automatic victory, he could have done that very easily. But he has allowed us the opportunity to participate in the battle. And if I have any message during this time of the coronavirus is do not get soft. It might seem that everyone out there is on lockdown. They're not. Out there somewhere is the enemy, and he's not on lockdown. The enemy is working overtime. He's working harder than you to kill, steal, and destroy. He is putting in the time. He is burning the night oil. The enemy is going without food. The enemy is going without sleep. The enemy is going without luxury because he wants to defeat you. You cannot get soft, not now. When you have been called by God, you've been given a gift, but that gift needs to be worked on every day. You have to go into your closet every day and work on your craft. You have to get in your basement. You have to write those sermons. You have to sing those songs. You have to play them out in your head over and over again. For all of the hackers out there and the IT people that I love working together with, now is the time to develop things for the gospel, to get into your closet, put in the midnight oil, and work on your craft over and over and over. Do not get soft. Life gets tough, but you have the word of God inside of you, and you are tougher than the times that we live in. When life hands you a bag of crap, you make lemonade. This is what God, I believe, has called us to do. Do not get soft. You have been given a gift, but you have to dig for it. You have to find it. Your gift is a little bit like IKEA furniture. It's been delivered to you, but you have to take it and put it together. You have to figure out how all the pieces go together. You have to work at that gift, or you're never going to have it. You can let it sit in the box. It's in your living room. You can benefit from it, but you're going to have to put it together yourself. No one can do this for you. You have to put in the work. Life has given you a gift from God, but it's not a crutch. You have to work on it every day. Do not get soft. You were designed for this struggle. You were not designed for comfort. Your body works better. Your mind works better. Your faith works better when you face constant resistance. I wish that weren't the case. I wish I could lose weight and work out and still eat tacos every day. I wish that I could get buff without having to go out and run or exercise every day, but that's not the way it works. I actually get stronger when I face resistance. And the more resistance I face, the more strength I can build day to day. Do not get soft. You have to be firing on all cylinders. Your spirit man will die on the couch. Your pajama pants are poisonous. Wake up every day ready to do something that you have never done before. And remember, one of the things that I love to say is you are never too old to die of something new. Do not get soft. You might feel weak. You might feel like you have no strength. You might feel that you're on lockdown. You might feel that you no longer have a job. You might feel like you no longer have finances. You might feel like I just can't do it. Do not get soft. Now is the time to grow. Now is the time to expand. I just shared a message a couple weeks ago about stretching out your tent pegs. When I was in the military, when I went into the enemy's territory, I did not build a fortress. I moved in a tent. Our headquarters was in a tent. Why? Because we were constantly taking new territory. When you are advancing, you advance in tents. I love that the Bible does not tell us expand the area of your fortress, expand your walls. It says expand your tent pegs because you are in enemy territory. You are only here for a temporary amount of time, but you got to fight. When you're in the enemy territory, you have to always be on your guard. And this is something that I believe we face as Western Christians that make us weaker. When we think that we don't have to fight, we're given ground to the enemy. One of the things that we used to say in the Marine Corps over and over and over, today, sweat or you'll bleed tomorrow. Today, you need to sweat because somewhere out there, the enemy is working harder than you. You need to push to your limits every single day. Paul tells us that we are to run the race. And to run the race, we have to run it as if we are going to win, to fight the good fight. I love that. analogy. I'm sorry that I went a little bit longer, but that is the message that I wanted to share, that we cannot get soft. And so those three myths, I believe, make us weaker as Christians. And the moment that we become more grateful for all the things that we have, the moment that we do not rely upon the resources that we think we need, the moment that we know that we have to work for everything that we have on this side of eternity, are the moments that I believe that God can use us the most on the evangelistic field.
Oh my goodness.
Does that make sense?
Oh my goodness.
Did I go too long?
Oh no. Can we just shout this from the hilltops? Can we just pass this to everybody? I'm going to have everybody in the school listen to this. This was amazing. And let me just, if you have a few minutes to hang out, anybody have a comment or question, because this was awesome and we really needed this. The best Go Fight Win talk in the world ever. Okay. Questions, comments. Thank you so much, Eugene. Comments.
Yeah.
Anybody have a comment? We got a lot of missionaries here. Let's see, where are our missionaries here? Clarine and Kuzan, any comments from South Africa? They're getting ready to go to Lafayette soon, but they've been traveling their entire lives, it seems, too. Comments? You guys have a comment?
I know that when I first, one of the kind of the background of this message is that when I first arrived inside of China and I seen that they were going through so much persecution, my immediate response was, why are you not fighting the government? Why you have rights. You have human rights. You have religious rights. You have. I started to preach this idea of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. You are entitled to certain ideas, but they began to share with me that no, this is where God has us, and this is what we are to face on a daily basis, because this prepares us to where we are going. It took me a long time to accept that, because the American in me wanted to protest the government that was trampling on their rights. Write a letter, do some marches, fight the government, at least put up some angry posts on Facebook, something. But what I saw was a group of people that were incredibly grateful for the salvation that God had given to them, and knew that God has called us into this fight, not just for China, but to go through this time of persecution to prepare us for the nations that God has called us for. It's not, this message is not one that goes over well in most circles, so I'm happy that Nancy, you're at least okay with a little bit of it.
Well, the only thing is I'm a little bit struggling because the pajama pants. I'm just Clarine and Kuzan, you have a comment?
Yeah, I remember when we came to the US the first time, our leader said that because we have so much resistance and we don't have enough support, that there is a problem of our faith. And I went and did a really deep study about prosperity, and I found that Joseph, when he was a slave in Potiphar's home, the scriptures say, and God prospered Joseph. Then he went to prison, and it said God prospered Joseph in the prison. And the same with David when he was fleeing in the caves of Adullam from Saul. It said God prospered David. And so prosperity in the Bible is not what is preached in the church, in the Western church. And because I think of the African pastors in Malawi, same as in China, real men of God with not much education, but the power of the Spirit work through their lives, and they live off $30-50 a month. And they and so I couldn't understand that disqualify people's faith for not having money. So it's what you said is really true.
Thank you so much, Clarine and Kuzan. Did you have something, Clarine?
I just want to say what Eugene was saying, that we need to find out exactly the strategies and plans of God, because like he said, we need to, when you are in a situation, you might make sure what you're fighting. Are you fighting for the government? Are you fighting for God? There's a different way, because sometimes God takes you around that big mountain to the other side because you have another plan that's in front of you. So it's not about standing against certain or to try to implement the Christian faith in places. It's about the Lord have a way, a strategy, a plan, and we need to follow that. And sometimes it's hard when there's so many things going on around. But just to listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit, because God will take you from A to B. But there's a lot of happening between A and B. And Satan wants to distract us from the real purpose of what we are called to do.
I don't know if you guys have ever heard of a study that took place by Yale University in 2018. But if I'm going to share about it really quick, because I think that this ties in at least a little bit. One of the things that I have learned from the Chinese working together with them is that the suffering that they go through has created better times for future generations. That's not their goal. The goal is to do the will of God. But in that will of God, there are blessings. And those blessings are, like you were saying in South Africa, that those can be, so many different. You can be in jail and be more blessed than somebody who is, in Hollywood with a lot of natural or with a lot of worldly wealth. God's blessings come in so many different ways. But when I was following, so I did a study that I wrote up called Chasing Revival, where we follow the gospel message from Acts chapter 1 up until today, 2020, where the gospel has gone, how it got from point A to point B, and where the gospel has not yet gone. And while I was doing this study, one of the things that I realized is everywhere the gospel went, there was immediate persecution, there was immediate resistance, but over time, those that endured that resistance ended up blessing the future generations. And in fact, you can trace all of the benefits that we have today in Western countries to those forefathers who suffered before us, walking in the will of God. They walked in the will of God, they suffered, but out of that came this beautiful kind of joy and blessing. And one of the, because there's two sides to a ditch, right? There's this one side where you have a prosperity teaching and you look to God to bless you financially or whatever, and that's the only kind of goal that you're after. And then there's this other ditch where there is this over glorification of martyrdom, where you actually want to put yourself into extreme poverty, even if that's not where God wants you for that time. It's all about walking in the will of God, regardless of where he wants you or regardless of what that resistance is. And one of the things that I found interesting, because it happens everywhere. Whenever I look at North and South Korea, one side allows the freedom of the gospel. There you see all of these amazing blessings when it comes to medical, academia, economy. All those things are actually transformed from the gospel. And then you go just above the border across the 38th parallel and to North Korea, and what you find is the exact opposite, where they reject God, they reject his teaching, they persecute Christians, and they suffer in every way. They have poor academics, they have poor medicine, they have in every way you can just see poverty. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. If you're not, you can actually, there is a podcast that you can listen to the actual individuals involved in this study. It's called Freakonomics. It's the episode number 360. And I found this so fascinating because there is this idea where God's people go, there is resistance and persecution in the beginning, but over time, those people and their future generations become blessed because of his blessing upon their lives. And there was a study done in 2018 by Yale University. There were two people leading this by the name of James Choi and Dean Carlin. They're both economic professors at Yale University, and they did this study together with a ministry in the Philippines called International Care Ministries, ICM. And International Care Ministries, what they do is they work in really poor areas in the Philippines. And the reason I found this absolutely fascinating is because I did not predict the outcome of this at all. So basically what they did in this Yale study is they take 6,000 people from very similar economic backgrounds in a very poor island in the Philippines. And they take these 6,000 people and they break them up into 4 different groups. And the 4 different groups are basically the first group, they teach them the gospel. And they have a team of pastors that come in every week, once a week, 90 minutes, and they preach the gospel for 1 year. They bring in another group and they teach livelihood. They teach, how to make investments. They teach how to start your own business, how to invest in those businesses, how to keep diseases from going around your village by increasing sanitation. So for 90 minutes, the same amount of time every single week, the second group gets these livelihood teachings. And then there's a third group, and the third group gets both. They get both the livelihood teaching and the gospel together, but it's split over the 90 minutes once a week. So you got those 3 groups, and then you have a 4th group. The 4th group is just a control group. They get nothing, just to see, where the other groups fall at the end of the year. And what they wanted to do in this Yale study is to find out, is there something to a religious teaching, or is that can you just get rid of that and only teach people life skills and education to be able to build up their economy? And at the end of the first year, what they found was that there was one group that surpassed all the other groups by more than 9%. The annual income and the living standards for one group out of these 4 groups increased by 9%. And again, you can get all of this documentation on the Yale economic website. They actually have it available. They did a dissertation on it. Or you can listen to, like I said, Freakonomics podcast episode number 360. 360. So on 360, you get the results of this. And so I was listening to this podcast and I thought, one of the things that I do a lot in Back to Jerusalem is we do humanitarian, we do business investment. Business is one of the main ways that I work in closed countries, and we preach the gospel. So when I heard this, I thought, of course, it's the group that has both the livelihood and the gospel. They're the ones that actually did the best. And I was wrong. The group that only got the gospel, it surpassed all the other groups in every way by more than 9%.
Wow.
The gospel transforms lives. So, it's easy to, look at just the hardship that people face in the opposition, but that opposition comes with a crown. But it doesn't take away the fact that we have to work for it. It doesn't take away the fact that we have to fight for it. It doesn't take away the fact that we have to overcome this opposition. And right now during this coronavirus, one of the things that we are super excited about is God has been really downloading so many different ways that we can preach the gospel that we've never really had before. So, some of you might be familiar with our little small pill Bible, which is it's a hologram Bible that you hold in your hand. It illuminates the air in front of your face. We've been using that now for a while. We're now distributing that in mainly North Korea as well as the gulags in Western China. But now God has put it upon us to start developing an audio Bible that is about the size of a small pen. And it does not need to be charged. It charges itself by moving back and forth. And we are taking that to the areas that cannot benefit from the pill Bible because they're illiterate. So we're going into areas that are illiterate and using this speaker Bible, which is the size of a pen. We're super excited about using it because we have this time now to develop it. We didn't have this time before. And we feel that God is allowing us to get into new areas and do new things that we've never been able to do before. I just did a podcast, or not a podcast, sorry, a live interview with our hackers this afternoon.
Wow.
And we're developing an intranet system that allows Christians in Iran to share files back and forth, videos, teachings, audio files, ebooks, over the internet system, the national internet system, without being caught or blocked. And so there's a lot of different things that are happening right now during this time of the coronavirus, and we feel that now is not the time to slow down. Now is the time to take more territory than has ever been humanly possible before.
Amen. This is so amazing. Now, Eugene, some of these people have taken that class, your online class, and then I just got a text message from one of them that said that they tried to log in past month or so, and it was like blocked, and it said something like, "We're working on it. We're going to be back in a." So it signed up. There was a Chasing Revival one that said nothing here. It's coming soon. Although they used the same thing that they had been using before. It was working earlier, and then all of a sudden it didn't work. So I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that. So thanks for letting me know. I'll just contact our U.S. office and let them know. They'll update it. It could be that we have made some changes because we've made the entire Bible study. It's been changed a little bit into a daily Bible study that we have up online. And so every day is a new day that we're actually putting up a Bible study for each day from the Chasing Revival series. And so that compilation might be interfering with the loading. I'm not sure, but I'll look into it and ask and find out.
I'm thinking too that it might have been because what was happening was when you went in there this year, the book didn't load. You just had your videos, but the book was separate. So I think there was but anyway, it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal work. And I was just strongly encouraging them for our church history section for them to study that. And so I think there was maybe one more question here. It was with Emily. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you so much. God bless you. I've enjoyed everything that you shared, and just increase on everything that you're doing. But I don't know if you can share this or not, or answer the question, but how, if you can't answer, it's okay. How does it work with the underground churches as far as like, we're so free? I mean, you might not be able to answer how the structure or all of it is, or if you can't answer it, that's fine. But I was just wondering, in a closed country, like even with a church that's so established in China to have 9 million people, how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, that one church alone, 10 million people. Right now, we estimate the number of Christians inside of China to be, around 150 million believers. So China will vary. So right now, that means that the number of Christians inside of China outnumber the number of Communist Party members that are in charge of China. That's why the Chinese Communist Party right now are persecuting so strongly, especially in the last 2 years, is because the number of Christians now outnumbers them. And that for them is a very scary idea, because they know how they came to power. And so now they are very suspicious of anybody that gathers together and meets together without proper approval. So the entire structure I write about in detail and break it down about as Mickey Mouse as I can possibly do it in a book called The Underground Church. It's a book that I came out with a couple of years ago, but just to give you a really quick kind of overview of it. Basically, the entire structure. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, this is the book here, The Underground Church. So that is the only book that I know of, that and another book called Jesus in Beijing. I didn't write that one, Jesus in Beijing, but Jesus in Beijing was written by the former Beijing Bureau for Time magazine. And it's one of the best books on the subject out there. It's a really, really good book. And I highly recommend it. But basically, the entire structure was not planned. The entire structure that we have today inside of China did not come from somebody that had an idea, put together a PowerPoint presentation, wrote up a booklet and gave seminars to people to carry out. The entire system inside of China, as we now use, was brought about by, I mean, I can say accident. Accident is not the right word, but I'm going to use that word anyway for right now. The pastor, I'll give Zhang Liang, a pastor that I wrote about. I'll give his life as an example. He was one of the top Communist Party officials in his area. He was a shining star, pretty young, rising through the ranks really fast before he became a believer. When he became a believer, he started to have Bible study in his home just with his mother and immediate family. When the government found out about it, he was arrested and thrown in jail. When he was released, he came back and his home had new believers that he had never met before, now meeting in his home secretly, but they looked to him because he's considered to be the person that knew the most. There was no Bible. People did not have missionaries or believers. They didn't have any teaching materials. They only knew rumors about Jesus. And in those rumors, they tried to make sense as much as they could, but they looked to the person that they thought knew the most, which was Zhang Liang, who thought that he knew nothing. So he taught, but it was reluctant. Nobody wanted to be the leader. Zhang Liang did not want to be the leader. Zhang Liang's group, his church, the church name is called Fangchang. Fangchang is the name of the county because nobody had a name for it. So they just started calling it the county that it came from. So it wasn't named, Zhang Liang Ministries. It wasn't named after his name. There was no, neon lights around, some cool name that he came up with, like, Cottonwood Stream Church or, something like that. It was just, he named it, people named it, referred to it after the county Fangchang. And all of the top networks that I work with are the same. None of them are named after people. They're all named after counties. So when he was arrested and he came back home and he found his house was full, the people there looked to him as the leader, okay? He was arrested again. And when he came back, there were more people than could fit in his house that were new believers. So they had to split into two houses, and he began to split his time between those two houses, going back and forth and preaching. And then there were too many people for security reasons in those houses, so they had to split again into 4 houses. Then he split his time among 4 houses. Now he spends every day traveling, going and preaching at different churches, all that consider themselves a part of his church. But he's only maybe able to be there once every 3 years. And he travels around to all these different places preaching. But as he does this, he has leaders that travel with him. They live with him. They eat with him. And when he goes into the homes, he doesn't have a prayer study. He doesn't have a green room. He doesn't have a special reception place where he's by himself. And then, everybody waits for him to come out and nobody can ask him questions when he goes back into that room. He lives with them. He eats with them. He sleeps in the same room. So there is this discipleship that takes place in real time, in real relationship. And so that is taught also to the young leaders. And so these young leaders learn the exact DNA of their teacher. And then when they go out to also preach into these different churches, they're teaching in basically the same way. If you tell me what time a believer in China wakes up in the morning to pray, I can tell you which network they belong to, because the DNA is so pure among these old country networks because of the discipleship that takes place on a personal level. I can tell you that I think it's amazing, but I do not fit into that culture. I like my privacy. I'm in the middle of nowhere in Sweden, and nobody's changed anything because you don't know if they're being, they're trying to maintain social distance because of the coronavirus, or they're just being natural Swedes. Swedish people usually stay away from, other people if they can. I actually enjoy that. So I don't like being around big groups of people. Leave it to God to put me in the middle of China. But I actually don't like being around big groups of people, but it is a part of their culture. It is a part of who they are. These churches have this patriarch structure based on the founder. and they keep the pure DNA on that founder. So you can have 10 million people that may not come to the same building, but they all have inherited the same DNA from their leader and take their directions from their leaders. Now, that might sound exciting to you, but I guarantee you I can name several things that the Chinese sacrifice in order to have that in their lives that maybe you or I would not be willing to give up. I'll give you an example. I've given this example before. In China, I worked together with a pastor. He's a very good friend of mine, Joshua. He's actually traveled with me extensively throughout the United States. Pastor Joshua has a much smaller church. He's only got about 4 million believers in his church. And so he and I started working with these 5 young ladies that were studying. They were a part of the first group that we were moving into North Korea. And as we were preparing them, they had to go through a language study. And then me and the pastor would go up once every 2 months and spend time with them, see how they were doing, encourage them, and get them prepared for moving into North Korea. One of the ladies was starting, all of these ladies are pretty young. One of the ladies was starting to gain weight. And the pastor told her very plainly, "You're putting on a little bit of weight. How am I supposed to get you married if you're this big?" And then told another girl, said, "I want you to take her out running every morning at 5:30 so we can get her ready to get married." Then he looked at me. I mean, I want nothing to do with this. I agree with nothing you just said. I think the girl looks fine. But it was a part of that culture and the way the pastor is involved. And that was considered to be very natural. When we had our first opportunity to send missionaries into North Korea, it was a restaurant that we were starting. So we were starting a restaurant inside of North Korea, and the pastor had a cook that was able to get a visa to go in to work at that restaurant to become a missionary inside of North Korea. The problem is he never studied the language. So we needed somebody that could study the language. No problem. We had 5 young ladies who had just graduated from a language school that speak the North Korean language. I said, she can be one of the hostesses and help the cook at the restaurant that we're going to start. Sounded like a great idea to me. The pastor was like, "No, can't do that. I can't send in a young unmarried man together with a young unmarried female who are going to be working on the missionary field together and not be married." I was like, "Oh yeah, you're right. Well, we can always arrange for a third person to be a part of that party." And he said, "No, it's no problem. I'll have them get married." I was like, I want nothing to do with that. And he's like, no, I know what you're thinking. Don't worry. I give them 40 minutes to meet. Today, they are married. They're serving in North Korea. They have children. And it's an amazing setup. I would not have wanted to have my wife picked out for me by my pastor. But in China, that's a very normal thing. And actually, the more I look at the Bible, the more I find that the Chinese culture is closer to the biblical Judaic culture than my culture. And so even though that it might sound amazing the way that the church has grown, to 10 million people in one church, that does come with a certain amount of cultural submission that takes place in the Chinese culture that makes a church like that possible. And has been an amazing part. I have a Western background. I don't try to be Chinese. You know what my Chinese name is? Eugene. I use the name my mama gave me. So I didn't adopt a Chinese name. I didn't try to become Chinese. I am who God made me. If God wanted me to be born in China as a Chinese, I would have been. I come to the table with certain gifts, talents, and I have a cultural background that has specifically trained me to be what I'm supposed to be, serving on the field. But I also cannot try to transform the Chinese to leave their culture to become more like my culture. And so I serve them where they are at. I often use the analogy of David. David and Saul were both called by God. But when it came time for David to go to war, David could not wear the armor that God had called Saul to wear when he went into the battle. You cannot take Saul's armor and force it upon David. Saul's armor is for David. David's method is for David. Or Saul's armor is for Saul. David's is for David. And so that's the way we work and complement each other. I believe that our God is a diverse God. If you want to see true diversity, you look into the kingdom of God. If you want to see fake diversity, you look to the world that tries to find ways to look diverse, but they will ridicule anything that is different. That's one of the reasons I love to serve. I know that was the long answer, maybe not what you were looking for exactly, but that's how the church, a little bit of insight on how the church works inside of China and how they maintain such large fellowships.
Eugene,
Thank you. That was wonderful. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, that's okay. I'm sorry. There was a question real quick on trafficking and getting involved, but I don't know that you do a lot of that. You're involved in a lot of that, human trafficking.
Yeah, no, we are involved in human trafficking. We traffic missionaries into closed countries. We do that quite a bit. We smuggle them. We have an underground railroad system with young ladies that have been abused, that are being sold into marriage or slavery, or especially as it pertained to ISIS in Iraq and Syria. We have been hugely involved in that, creating safe houses for young ladies, as well as providing training for them and investing in businesses for ladies that have been abused, because we have felt that one of the best ways to help women get out of an abusive situation is not train them on how to get a job where they have to get hired by someone else, but train them how to start their own business and operate independently as much as possible, so that they don't have to go back to a life. Because even if you get some of them free, they may feel so worthless and so incapable of surviving that they could easily slip back into a dangerous situation where they feel like the only way that they can survive is by selling themselves. So we try to work together with them to start businesses that will help them become independent and in a sustainable business. We are not, it's not a big part of our work, but it is a part of our work. It's something that I have been directly involved in, and it has been probably one of the most heart-wrenching things to be witnessing.
The other part of that question for them was how would they get involved? How would you suggest they get involved besides money? They're doing money, but that's what they're asking. Besides, how else can they get involved?
Well, there's several ways that you can get involved. We really appreciate anybody that joins together with Back to Jerusalem, praying together, becomes a prayer partner. One of the things that we highly encourage people to do is come and join us on a prayer trip. Our prayer trips are a little bit different than, George has actually been together with us on one of our prayer trips, before. When we take people into different nations, we're a really small group, right? Even though we serve millions of people inside of China, we ourselves, the Back to Jerusalem team that I serve together with, we're a very small team. And so what we try to do is open up opportunities for other people. We don't try to own anything. We don't try to, and this has been a huge thing that we've learned from the Chinese, that we don't have to pee on a tree and make it ours, to make it our territory. But instead, we try to help as many people as possible to get into ministry. And if they never work with us again, we're okay with that. We plug in a lot of people for the very first time, going into new countries, make introductions, and we see there have been many people. I can name off several ministries that have been a spinoff from just coming on a prayer trip together with us, and God moved in their hearts to help in a certain way or get involved in a certain way. That has been super exciting for us. We also do not need to maintain large amounts of funding. We are very thankful for our partners, but we work in conjunction with businesses. We've done that from the very beginning, as the Chinese House Church does, which does not, it puts us in a place where we do not have to rely on funding. So we are in a position that if we get nothing this year, or if we get $10 million this year, we're actually doing the exact same work. We're in a place where we can funnel resources through 100% because of the way that we've set up our structure. let me just touch on that for a minute, because this is really important for anybody that wants to get involved. You might think, well, I don't really have that much experience. You might have more experience than you know. I've had people that come to me that have been truck drivers, and they said, you know what, I'm a truck driver. There's nothing that I really have to contribute, but if there's any way that I can help on the field, how can I help? I used that truck driver to come and train our Chinese on how to drive big trucks. We started a trucking company to start shipping goods from China into North Korea and from North Korea into China. That trucking company is still going today because of people that, you know, were saying, hey, whatever I have, I'm ready to give my resources. So working together with the Chinese in areas where it is illegal to be a Christian, we have found it very advantageous to take on the same kind of system that the first century church did, and what we see in the book of Acts, which is use ministry to help us get into new areas and to help sustain missionary efforts. So we have actually been able to start I usually start anywhere from 4 to 10 businesses per year. In different parts of the world. And we use those not only to get access into different areas, but also to raise funding that we need for different projects that we're involved in. So by learning that from the Chinese and doing that on the missionary field, we've also done that in the West. So if you ever go to any of our offices around the world, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Holland, whether it's in Canada or the US or wherever, what you will find is that we don't buy property. We don't try to start up a headquarters. We don't try to get into a system where we have to pay a monthly fee and feed this dragon every single month. What we do is we partner together with businesses. So for instance, one of our first headquarters, our missionary offices in the US, was together with a good friend of mine, David Rennerson, who owned one of the most well-known gun shops in all of the US. So we had his gun shop, and then right beside his gun shop was our office. Anybody that came in to buy ammo or a gun got a pamphlet from Back to Jerusalem. They could buy books from Back to Jerusalem. People got ministered to more coming in to buy books at that gun shop than some of them got in Sunday morning services. And I tell you, we were one of the safest offices in all of the United States. Nobody wanted to come in. When you're preaching in Muslim areas, sometimes it might feel like, you have to have safety apparatuses put in place. At a gun shop, we didn't really feel that need. Now we've just moved because we needed a bigger location. Now we've just moved our location to a place where we have a distribution warehouse. And the distribution warehouse is connected to a factory that we have inside of China. So if you're in the United States and you ever go to Home Depot, I heard that's a great place to hang out right now during the coronavirus. If you ever go to Home Depot and you see the electric fireplaces, those are probably made in our factories in China. The distribution center for those is also the Back to Jerusalem office. And we don't have to pay for rent, overhead, internet, electricity, water. All of that is absorbed by the business. And then we have an office there and we run out of that. And we do that in many different areas. And what that does is it allows us to use all the donations that come in from people to go 100% to the people on the ground. And that has contributed a lot to the number of missionaries that are currently in the area between China and Jerusalem. So that is a major way for people to get involved. So if you're involved in any sort of business, if you're an independent business owner, small or big, we would love to connect just on that. That is a big way to get involved with Back to Jerusalem.
That's such an awesome answer. I think we've got one more. Donna, did you have a question or comment? Thank you, Eugene, for just hanging out with us. I know you're probably tired. You've just poured into us, and this has been amazing.
Yeah, no problem at all.
But Donna, go ahead. You had something.
Comment. It's that area for the Western Christians, for the love and the unity of the spirit, and also sisterhood, brotherhood. It brings a lot, because as I was born in Uganda in my childhood, I saw the Christians, my family, my parents, which unity they had, and that's what made even some of the children survive up today. Like, for example, someone passing the roadblock, pretending to be crazy, so that they can go in prison and secure someone else's child, things like that. So in Western, I find that we are very sufficient. We don't almost need one another. Someone can have a car, even not give another one a ride, because they are very independent like that. So the unity that even the Muslims, even if they have their crazy stuff, but when it's trouble, they unify and they are together. So I think we need more unity and love, even not when you have that kind of love, even when people are in casualty or anything, you will not leave them behind. You almost put your life for your brother or your sister in Christ.
This is a really important issue that I've actually shared about before to this group. I believe, George, there was a time where I was sharing about one of the most important resources that we have on the mission field is each other and the trust that we build with one another. One of the things that I absolutely cherish in life is the brothers and sisters that I have inside of China. And it's not based on finances at all. Whenever I work in certain locations around the world, I can often come across areas where missionaries have been for a while, and they have created networks based on finances. And so the churches that are local churches in a place like certain parts of India or Nepal or Kenya, we can find churches that will be whatever denomination is paying the bills for that month. And their loyalty goes about as far as the paycheck. But in China, one of the amazing things about the persecution that they have been going through is that they actually reject most Western connections. And our relationship, the relationship that I have together with them, I actually benefit from a generation that went before me. And so I was introduced by people that the Chinese trust. And even though I've been there for 20 years, I still am operating on the trust that was built by an older generation, and I stand on their shoulders. But that trust is not based on finances. And that trust is something where we rely on one another. And when I'm together with the Chinese, they do not look for back to Jerusalem or me in particular to pay the bills for the things that we're working together on. It is a true partnership. They carry their financial weight. We carry our financial weight. We try to go further, faster, deeper together. Now, in what you were talking about, I'm assuming some of it, I apologized, I was not able to hear it all, but I'm assuming you were talking about the reliance that people have on one another when they're in a persecuted area. One of the tragedies that I find in the Western church is that relationships usually go only as deep as networks. That my relationship to you is often connected to where you can get me in the ministry. That if you are an important person in the ministry and I make connection with you, maybe I too will be able to build on what you have started. And the moment that I no longer benefit from the relationship with you, maybe we're not close friends anymore. Maybe my relationship with you is only based on the idea of what you can give me or what benefit you provide to me. Now, it might not be a bad thing, right? You might have somebody that in the ministry, they're able to provide financial support and you're able to provide labor support, and the two of you guys get together really well. But when that person is no longer providing financial support, do you still have friendship and loyalty? Because otherwise it's just a business. And otherwise there's very little difference between that relationship and the relationship of prostitution, where you pay a fee, you get a service, and then after that service is rendered and that payment is paid, then the relationship is over. So I think that we have oftentimes a lot of prostitution in the American Christian experience, where people only have relationships for as long as you have a benefit, or as long as there is some sort of networking that can benefit myself. And that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about my relationship with George, is that I feel that we have a connection based on a godly friendship where we have identified with a spiritual, forgive me, George, if I'm speaking on your behalf, but this is the way that I feel, is that there is something inside of him that I identify with. And God, I believe, has brought our paths together for this time and this place in history to make a difference for his kingdom, regardless of whether I can see a tangible benefit or not. And if there is a benefit and that benefit disappears, I believe George and I will still be very close friends and benefit from one another as iron sharpens iron, regardless of what I think I can gain from my relationship with him. Does that make sense? And I think that
Yes,
oftentimes, yep.
We shouldn't be users. We should be lovers, not users. And that's when we use, it becomes like prostitution.
That's
Yes.
right. That's what he was saying. Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you, Eugene, for saying that. That's awesome. Thank you. This has been so amazing.
We love you, brother Eugene. If I could just say,
I love you guys as well.
Noma too. It's like we've known each other, I think, 8 years, something like that, and we've been through the phrase of organized relationships for profit or for prostitution, and we've overcome. Not that either of us was involved in it, but we rode through it in some of our connections.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I really appreciate about, I mean, my background, like I said before, is from the US military. And I've seen a lot of the guys that I've served together with commit suicide after leaving the military. Why? Because many of them could not find the kind of relationships that they had inside the military. Those kind of relationships that help you through battle. Those kind of relationships that you know that your friend that you would give your life for would give their life for you. That even if it cost them their life, they would do it in order to save yours, because their love for you is greater than the love for themselves. But I think sometimes and this is not all Western Christians, of course, but there is this permeating spirit in Western Christianity where there is more of a focus on networking and what that ministry can do for you as an individual. And the more that they can do, sometimes the more motivated you are to make that connection. And the less that a person can do for you, sometimes the less motivated you are to make that connection. And that is a really sad thing. So these military guys get out of the military and they don't find that friendship. They don't find that relationship that goes deeper than just surface level connections. And I personally feel that every single person that I work together with in the ministry, every single one of them, I would give my life for them. And I believe that they would give their life for me. And that is the mentality that we try to maintain on a regular basis. God has put us in connection with people that I believe I will serve together with for the rest of my life. That God has brought us and our paths together so that we can serve together and serve one another. The world will know us by the way that we love one another. And it's that loyalty that goes past the state of being benefited. And I think that this is so important when looking at modern day evangelism and serving on the field, is surround yourself with people that you love and people that love you. I do not work with people that I don't like. I don't care what resources they bring to the table. I know that, there's probably a message that would teach me otherwise, that would tell me I'm doing the exact wrong thing. But I love all the people that I work together with, and I don't work with people that I don't like to work with. I think a lot of people stay in really bad relationships because they feel that there's a benefit for them at the end of that road. There's a big supporter. They bring in finances. They bring in something of benefit. So they maintain relationships that are just not healthy. And I know that that goes off on a tangent a little bit, but as we're talking about relationships, or talking about, people being selfish, or talking about the different way that people connect in a place like Uganda, like my sister was talking about, I think that that is an important element to at least acknowledge and bring up.
Amen. Emily was
Does that
asking,
make sense?
yeah. Emily was asking, that's awesome. Emily was asking about being able to find out what the greatest needs are to help your ministry, any pressing prayer requests. I sent her to the to the website. So anyway, is that a good choice, Eugene, to send her to the website?
Sorry, guys, I lost you there for a minute.
Is it okay? I mean, Emily was asking how she can actually support the needs for or to do whatever prayer or whatever for the ministry. And so I sent her to your website. Is that the best choice to do, to go to your website, to go to Back to Jerusalem? What would you recommend if they wanted to be part of what you're doing?
I'm sorry, Nancy. I only got part of that question. Did you ask me something?
Yeah. Asking you.
I'm so sorry. My internet is not that stable here.
Well, and probably it's getting time to let you go too. So we can let you go. I sent everybody to Back to Jerusalem if they wanted to support, or if they wanted prayer requests to help you to what your latest needs are. I sent them to the podcast. Is that a good choice?
Yes, it is. And right now, during this time of when everybody is basically on lockdown and not able to leave, if you download the Back to Jerusalem app for your phone or your iPad, we are making all of our materials that are electronic. We're making everything free of charge. So we want as many people as possible to Now, the tangible items we also have available. We've made them 50% off just to cover the cost, but you can bypass those and get everything for free, which is what we want to do. And so you can actually, if you download the app, all of those things will be available at least until the end of April, absolutely free. That's the Back to Jerusalem app. And yeah, you can go on to backtojerusalem.com. You can listen to our podcast as well. I've heard good reviews and bad reviews, so you can look at it yourself.
We love the intro. We love that intro. We've been chuckling about that. Anyway, George, do you want to close us out in prayer and bless Eugene for being such a blessing to us? Eugene, thank you. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you guys as well. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Go ahead, George.
Thank you. Cheshe. Yeah, Eugene's podcast is one of the best news sources that you can find anywhere. So I recommend it highly, because there's nothing like boots on the ground, face-to-face interviews and updates from around the world. So Heavenly Father, we thank you for Eugene's heart. Lord, we thank you for what you've done through him and in him. And we thank you in advance for what you're going to do through his precious family. Bless his two beautiful sons, Lord. And we just thank you for this next generation being raised up as strong leaders of character like Christ, and to do your work and to do it your way, obedient to your spirit. We thank you for his humble heart, Lord, willing to serve, to go behind enemy lines in dangerous places, risking his life. And it's worth it all, because Jesus, you are worth it all. And we thank you, Lord, for what you've done and what you're showing us, and help us to learn and spread this valuable wisdom, anointing, and humility in the West to help us to really